First day. It was the summer of 1973, and at the age of 3, it was time for me to start kindergarten. My mummy dressed me and said that I was going to have a special day today. We left the house and walked to the local school. As we approached, I could hear lots of noise, shouting, laughing, and other sounds. My mum pushed me through the gates to the school and shouted, "Have a special day." I turned around, but she was gone. I started to feel panic, and I knew no one. Tears filled my little eyes, and I started to cry. I heard my name being called, and I looked around thinking it was my mother. It was a strange lady who was smiling at me and saying, "Come and meet the other children." I stumbled and clumsily followed her into the classroom. As we entered the room, I looked around and there were millions of children. Well, actually, about 15. But at the age of 3, that was a lot. They were all playing and laughing together like they had known each other for years. I sat down on the floor and reached out to pick up a coloured brick. Just then, another boy grabbed the same brick and gazed at me with fury in his eyes. I let go of the brick and sat down again. I was shocked for a few minutes. Then I saw another toy. It was a toy robot, and it was the most amazing thing I had ever seen. Silver and shiny with blue arms and red eyes. Wow! I crawled over and reached out. Suddenly, there was a voice from behind me. "That's mine." I looked around and saw the biggest boy in the world. My eyes opened wide as I stood up quickly and ran over to the teacher, grabbing hold of her skirt. Just then the bell rang, and it was time for lunch. The dining hall smelt amazing, and I could see all sorts of wonderful things to eat. I looked hungrily at the food. Then the teacher came over and said, "Did you bring your lunch money?" I looked at her and said, "No." She sighed and said, "Oh well, looks like your mother has packed your lunch for you already. Sit down and enjoy your food." I sat down at a table of girls. I felt a little safer away from the big boys. I opened my lunch bag and reached in. I felt something that was wrapped in plastic. I pulled it out and opened my hand. There in my hand was a stale jam sandwich. The bread was curled up at the sides from the summer heat. The jam had melted through the bread and it was almost gone. I reached into the bag again, and this time I felt something harder. I pulled it out, and in my hand I found 2 broken biscuits wrapped in a piece of newspaper. The ink from the newspaper had rubbed off onto the biscuits, and I could see yesterday's date on one and a picture of a woman's shoe on another. I looked around, and each child was drinking a miniature bottle of milk. I love milk, and so I raised my hand and asked the teacher if I could have some. "Oh, I'm sorry, but there's none left," she said in a sympathetic voice. I sighed. I should have seen that coming, I thought as my stomach started to rumble with hunger, and I felt dizzy with the lack of fluids. After lunch, the teacher sent the children out into the playground to play. I ran from the building like a racehorse from a starting gate, out into the sunshine. I looked around with eyes like an eagle, looking for a way to escape. But then I saw a sand pit, and for a moment I was completely distracted. Before I continue my story, I must explain that sand pits were removed from schools many years ago because of the fact that cats love to use sand pits as a toilet. But in my early years of schooling, they were still there. I ran over to the sandpit and jumped in head first. I closed my eyes and grabbed fistfuls of sand. I knelt up and started to make a sandcastle. Just then I sniffed. There was a horrible smell coming from the sand. I looked down, and to my horror, I was covered in more than sand. The teacher walked over and said, "Oh dear, let's get you cleaned up, shall we?" The teacher led me to the bathroom and cleaned me. It took a long time, and my face was sore from her scrubbing me with the very scratchy old cloth. As we left the bathroom, she looked ahead and said, "Oh, it looks like you've missed the afternoon milk and cookies." My eyes rolled around in my head, and my heart sank with misery. Then I heard a voice calling my name. I looked around. It was my mother, standing at the gate smiling. I ran to her with tears in my eyes. I was so happy to be going home. On the way home, I tried to explain that my day had been terrible and that I hated school and never wanted to go back. But she just looked down, smiled and said, "See, I told you that you would have a special day, didn't I?" The end. Thanks for listening. See you next time.